There's a form of departure so powerful that it haunts people for years, yet it involves no dramatic exit, no slammed doors, no final words of condemnation. It's the simple act of walking away without a word, without explanation, without giving the other person the closure they desperately seek. Friedrich Nietzsche understood why this silent departure terrifies people more than any confrontation ever could, and his insights reveal something profound about human psychology and power. When someone walks away without a word, they leave behind a vacuum that the abandoned person's mind rushes to fill. No explanation means infinite explanations. No final words means the conversation never ends. No closure means the door in their psyche remains forever open, with a cold wind blowing through it that they can never quite shut out. Nietzsche recognized this as the ultimate expression of what he called the will to power. Not the power to dominate or control, but the power to remain sovereign over your own existence. When you walk away without a word, you're demonstrating that you owe no one an explanation for your choices. You're showing that your decision to leave stands on its own, requiring no justification, no permission, no mutual agreement to separate. Most people cannot conceive of such autonomy. We're trained from birth to explain ourselves, to justify our actions, to seek understanding and give closure. Every ending needs its ritual, its conversation, its mutual processing. But what happens when someone simply opts out of this entire social contract? They become incomprehensible, and what we cannot comprehend, we cannot forget. I knew a man who discovered this truth after years of trying to maintain a relationship with his narcissistic mother. He had tried everything: confrontation, boundary setting, therapy sessions together, lengthy letters explaining his feelings. Each attempt only gave her more ammunition, more drama to feed on, more opportunities to play the victim or the misunderstood parent. Then one day, after yet another manipulative episode, he simply stopped. No announcement, no explanation, no final conversation. He just ceased all contact. The effect on his mother was extraordinary. She cycled through every possible manipulation: rage, guilt, threats, love bombing, flying monkeys, public shamming. But each performance played to an empty theater. The silence on his end was absolute. Years later, family members reported that she still talked about him constantly, still tried to decode his departure, still waited for the explanation that would never come. His wordless exit had become the defining event of her life, precisely because it offered no definition at all. Nietzsche would say this man had discovered what he called the pathos of distance, the ability to create unbridgeable space between yourself and others through sheer will. It's not physical distance that matters, it's psychological distance. When you walk away without a word, you create a chasm that cannot be crossed because you've taken the bridge with you. This terrifies people because it confronts them with their own powerlessness. In a normal ending, even a hostile one, there's interaction, engagement, the possibility of influence. They can argue, persuade, manipulate, guilt trip, or at least have the satisfaction of fighting back. But when someone walks away silently, all these weapons strike empty air. It's like discovering that the person you've been fighting was never really there at all. The terror goes deeper than just loss of control. When someone leaves without explanation, they force the abandoned person to confront the possibility that they never really knew them at all. Every assumption about the relationship comes into question. If this person could leave without a word, what else about them was unknowable? What else about the relationship was illusion? A woman told me about ending a long friendship with someone who had become increasingly toxic. She had planned a conversation, prepared her points, rehearsed her boundaries. But when the moment came, she realized that any explanation would just become another opportunity for manipulation, another round of the exhausting game they'd been playing for years. So she simply stopped responding. No explanation, no goodbye, just absence. Her former friend's reaction was telling. First confusion, then increasingly frantic attempts at contact, then anger, long messages dissecting every possible reason for the silence. Then bargaining, promises to change, apologies for unnamed offenses.
Then depression, public posts about the pain of being abandoned. Finally, a kind of obsession, mutual friends reporting that years later, she still analyzed that wordless departure, still searched for meaning in the void.
Nietzsche understood that this response reveals our deepest existential terror, the fear of meaninglessness. We can handle rejection if we understand it. We can process abandonment if we can narrative it. But when someone walks away without a word, they deny us the meaning-making that makes loss bearable. They leave us alone with the unbearable possibility that maybe there was no meaning. Maybe we didn't matter enough to merit an explanation. Maybe we were simply irrelevant. This is particularly devastating to narcissistic personalities who depend on others' reactions to maintain their sense of self. The person who argues with them validates their importance. The person who explains their departure acknowledges the narcissist's significance. But the person who walks away without a word treats them as beneath explanation, unworthy of the energy it would take to provide closure. For a narcissist, this is existential annihilation. But the terror isn't limited to toxic personalities. Even in relatively healthy relationships, the wordless departure leaves a unique kind of wound. It denies us the ritual of ending, the ceremony of closure that helps us process loss. It leaves us suspended in psychological mid-air, unable to land on solid ground of understanding. Nietzsche would point out that this is precisely why it's so powerful. It refuses to participate in what he called slave morality, the system where we all agree to explain ourselves to each other, to seek approval for our choices, to make our decisions comprehensible to the crowd. The person who walks away without a word is exercising what he called master morality, the right to act from their own values without reference to others' understanding or approval. I witnessed this in a professional setting where a talented employee had been consistently undervalued and manipulated by management. They had dangled promotions, made promises, created elaborate reasons why she needed to wait just a little longer for recognition. She had played along, explained her worth, made her case repeatedly. Then one Monday, she simply didn't show up. No resignation letter, no 2 weeks' notice, no exit interview. She was just gone. The panic in the office was palpable. Management couldn't understand it. They had no narrative to explain it to higher-ups, no official resignation to file, no feedback to process. They tried calling, emailing, even sending people to her apartment. But she had moved on, literally and figuratively, without a word of explanation. Years later, that company still tells the story of her departure, still tries to understand it, still uses it as a cautionary tale without quite knowing what the caution is. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are, reaching a point where your actions flow from your own necessity, not from social obligation. The person who can walk away without a word has achieved a level of self-possession that most people never reach. They've transcended the need to be understood, the need to justify themselves, the need to make others comfortable with their choices. The terror this creates in others is multifaceted. First, there's the fear that if someone can walk away from them without a word, maybe they were walking away long before they physically left. Maybe the entire relationship was a kind of walking away, a slow withdrawal that went unnoticed. This retroactive doubt poisoning every memory, every shared moment now suspect. Second, there's the fear of their own capacity for such departure. If someone they knew could walk away without a word, could they themselves do it? Could they discover in themselves such profound indifference to others' need for closure? The possibility is both liberating and terrifying. Third, there's the fear that they might be walked away from again. Once you've experienced someone leaving without a word, you know it's possible. Every relationship becomes shadowed by this possibility. Every silence becomes potentially permanent. Every goodbye could be the last, without warning, without signs, without mercy. Nietzsche saw this as part of what he called the eternal recurrence, the idea that we must live as if every moment would repeat infinitely. The person who walks away without a word is saying, I would choose this departure infinitely. I need no conversation to validate it, no explanation to justify it, no closure to complete it. The leaving itself is complete. But here's what's crucial to understand. Walking away without a word isn't about cruelty or revenge. It's about recognizing when words have become useless, when explanation would only perpetuate dynamics that need to end. It's about having the strength to prioritize your own peace over others' need for understanding. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Sometimes the clearest communication is absence. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to simply remove yourself without the drama of explanation, without the negotiation of departure, without the performance of ending. The person who masters this art becomes unknowable in a way that haunts those left behind. They represent a freedom that most people can't imagine. The freedom to simply stop, to simply leave, to simply choose themselves without apology or explanation. They become a ghost that's somehow more present in absence than they ever were in presence. As you consider your own relationships, think about where you're staying because leaving would require too much explanation. Where are you performing the rituals of connection long after the genuine connection has died? Where are you providing closure that only perpetuates patterns that need to end? The capacity to walk away without a word isn't something to use lightly. But knowing you could, knowing you have that power, changes everything. It means you're staying because you choose to, not because you owe anyone an explanation for leaving. It means your presence is a gift, not an obligation. It means your words, when you choose to give them, are voluntary offerings, not required payments. And perhaps that's why it terrifies people so much. The person who can walk away without a word has discovered the ultimate freedom. The freedom to end things on their own terms, in their own time for their own reasons without needing anyone else to understand or approve. They've become what Nietzsche called the overman, not someone who dominates others, but someone who has achieved complete sovereignty over their own existence. And that kind of freedom, that kind of power, that kind of silence echoes long after they're gone.